She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I'm too old to play games." I didn't flinch. I just smiled and whispered, "Then let's skip to the good part." In that moment, everything stopped, the world, the noise, even the doubt between us. The first time I saw her, the room didn't suddenly go silent. No violin started playing. No spotlight followed her across the floor. It was quieter than that. Softer. Like the hush that settles over a room when someone who matters walks in. I was standing near the back of the art gallery, pretending to study a painting I didn't really understand. The crowd was elegant in that effortless way, quiet conversations, clinking glasses, a soft jazz tune humming through hidden speakers. The air smelled faintly of paint, perfume, and red wine. Then she walked in. She wasn't trying to be noticed. That was the first thing I picked up on. No loud laughter, no bright colors screaming for attention. Just a dark green dress that moved like it remembered how to be elegant. A silk scarf draped loosely around her shoulders. Her hair fell past her collarbone in soft, unbothered waves. But it was her eyes that caught me, steady, searching, alive in a way that made the rest of the room seem almost blurry. She stood in front of a painting, alone, one hand wrapped around a glass of wine, the other lightly resting against the side of her waist. Confident. Composed. Not hiding, but not inviting either. When someone passed by and tried to strike up a conversation, she smiled, polite, kind, but there was a distance in it. A wall built with quiet grace. She wasn't there to play at small talk. She was there to feel something real. I remember shifting my weight, pretending to be absorbed in the brushstrokes on the wall beside me. But my attention kept drifting back to her, to the way she tilted her head slightly as she studied the painting, to the soft rhythm of her breathing. And then, she looked at me. Just a glance. A single heartbeat of eye contact. But in that brief second, I felt it, a quiet pull. She didn't smile, but the corners of her lips softened, as if she recognized something in me too. Something unspoken. I turned away too quickly, suddenly aware of the pulse in my chest. It's strange, how you can spend years surrounded by people, and then in one quiet moment, a stranger looks at you like they see you. I didn't approach her that night. I told myself it was better to let moments breathe. She seemed like the kind of woman who had outgrown the chase, who didn't need someone to impress her with loud words or overplayed charm. If I was going to speak to her, it had to mean something. But I remember every small detail. The faint scent of bergamot that lingered as she walked past me. The warmth in the air after she did. The soft sound of her heels fading into the night as she left. And that was how it began. Not with fireworks. Not with a grand gesture. But with a woman who wasn't trying to be noticed, and a man who noticed anyway. I wasn't supposed to see her again. That night at the gallery felt like a fleeting page in a book I'd never get to finish. But some stories don't ask for permission. They find their way back. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that softens a city's edges. The streets were slick with silver light, puddles catching reflections of passing umbrellas. The small cafe on the corner was half empty, warm, and smelling faintly of coffee beans and something sweet baking in the back. I stepped inside mostly to escape the downpour. I hadn't even shaken the water off my coat before I saw her. She was sitting by the window, legs crossed, hair slightly tousled from the rain, a book resting open in her hands. Her scarf was loosely wrapped, and every so often she reached for a cup of something steaming, exhaling softly before taking a sip. For a second, I just stood there, frozen, like someone had quietly rewound the film of my life and pressed play again on the same face. She didn't see me at first, which gave me a moment to see her. She looked peaceful. And in a world that often moved too fast, she had this rare ability to make stillness look beautiful. When our eyes finally met through the glass reflection, it wasn't dramatic. It was warm. Like the quiet hum of a song you didn't realize you'd been missing. Her lips curved into the softest smile, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, it just happens. I walked over, my pulse tapping a quiet rhythm in my chest. Mind if I gestured to the seat across from her. She tilted her head slightly, the corner of her mouth lifting. Only if you're not allergic to silence, she said lightly. I laughed, because it wasn't forced, and because she meant it. She wasn't filling space with noise. She was inviting me into the quiet. We didn't rush the conversation. It trickled in slowly, like rain sliding down the windowpane. She asked what I was reading these days. I asked what pulled her into that book. She answered with thought, not performance. Every word she spoke carried weight, not because she tried to impress, but because she simply meant it. At some point, I noticed her hand brushing away a crumb from the table, and when she leaned forward to pass me a sugar packet, her fingers grazed the back of my hand. Just a brush. Barely a second. But my breath caught. And her eyes flicked up to meet mine, aware of what had just happened. The rain outside grew heavier, softening the world beyond the glass. Inside, everything felt strangely still. She told me she liked rainy days because they made the world quiet, easier to breathe in. And as I watched her trace the rim of her cup absent-mindedly with her finger, I realized something. I wasn't just drawn to her beauty. I was drawn to the way she moved through the world, unhurried, deliberate, unafraid of silence. When I left that cafe, the rain had soaked my shoes, and I couldn't have cared less. All I carried with me was the warmth of her small smile, the sound of her laugh, low, soft, real, and the faint sensation of her touch still resting on my skin. And for the first time in a long while, a stranger didn't feel distant anymore. Some nights don't need grand declarations. Some nights speak in silence, in the way two people walk side by side, just close enough to feel each other's warmth, but not quite touching. The evening had ended later than expected. A small gathering with mutual friends, nothing loud, just warm laughter, clinking glasses, low music playing through old speakers. The air outside had cooled, carrying the scent of wet pavement after a light drizzle. Streetlights painted the sidewalk in soft gold. She walked a little ahead of me as we left, her heels clicking gently against the ground, her scarf shifting slightly in the wind. I fell into step beside her without asking. She didn't look at me, but the corners of her lips curved just enough to tell me she didn't mind. It wasn't the kind of walk filled with forced chatter. It was something quieter. A shared rhythm. Our steps began to fall in sync, and in the spaces between the sounds of the city, I could hear the small things, the brush of her scarf in the wind, the soft sound of her breathing. I like nights like this, she said softly after a while, her gaze fixed on the street ahead. When everything slows down. There was a calmness in her voice, the kind of calm that comes from someone who has lived enough to know peace isn't loud. I nodded. Me too. It's like the world finally remembers how to breathe. She let out a quiet laugh, not sharp, not exaggerated, just warm. It wasn't about the words. It was about how easy it felt. A gust of wind slipped between us, carrying a few stray raindrops that clung to her hair. She brushed a lock behind her ear, and for a moment my hand twitched with the quiet urge to help her. I didn't. Not yet. But the thought lingered, hovering like a heartbeat between us. She slowed her pace when we reached a small stone bridge. The city stretched out beneath us, dark rooftops, glimmering lights, and the distant hum of life. She leaned slightly on the railing, wrapping her arms loosely around herself. I stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her shoulder. It was the kind of closeness you don't rush. You let it settle. I'm not good at pretending, she said suddenly, her voice quieter now. I don't have the patience for games anymore. I glanced at her. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking out at the lights, but her jaw was set, her eyes steady. This was honesty, not performance. I didn't try to give her a polished answer. I just let my presence speak first, standing there, unflinching, unafraid of the quiet. I don't want games, I said finally, my voice low. I want real. For a moment, neither of us moved. The wind brushed past us, cool and soft, and our shoulders almost touched. Almost. That tiny distance felt alive, like a question neither of us needed to answer yet. When we finally started walking again, the silence between us wasn't empty. It was warm. Something unspoken had shifted, something subtle but real. I didn't hold her hand. I didn't need to. But I knew, and I think she did too, that the space between us was no longer just space. There's a moment in every connection where the warmth starts to feel a little too real, and that's when the fear creeps in. Not because you don't want it, but because suddenly, you do. The night after our walk, she invited me over for coffee. Not dinner, not drinks, just coffee. Simple. Safe. Her place matched her energy, calm, uncluttered, warm. A soft lamp cast a golden hue over the living room. Books stacked in quiet corners. A faint scent of sandalwood lingered in the air. She was in a cream sweater, hair tied loosely, barefoot on the wooden floor. It was the kind of intimacy that didn't need effort. It just existed. We sat across from each other on her couch, cups in hand, legs tucked comfortably. The conversation started light, favorite books, travel stories, the odd humor in everyday life. But I could sense it, the subtle shift. Her gaze would drift off mid-sentence, like she was hearing a voice inside her head louder than mine. She put her cup down slowly and exhaled through her nose. You know, she began, her tone soft but steady. This is the part where things usually go wrong. I didn't interrupt. I just leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees, giving her space to speak. She hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. People like the idea of me, she said finally. They like the confidence. The calm. But when it starts feeling real, they remember the numbers. The years. And suddenly, everything shifts. Her voice didn't break, it wasn't a wound freshly opened. It was something she'd carried for a while. A quiet scar she'd learned to live with. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Not pity, something deeper. Something that wanted to protect the quiet ways she had learned to stand on her own. I don't want to be someone's phase, she added, almost in a whisper. I'm too old to build bridges for people who won't cross them. I set my cup down and looked at her, really looked. The way her hands stilled on her lap, the faint tension in her jaw, the flicker of fear behind the steadiness in her eyes. I'm not here to build half a bridge, I said softly. If I step in, it's all the way. Her breath hitched, just barely. Her gaze met mine, and for a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she gently pulled her hands into her lap, as if instinctively protecting herself. I reached out, not grabbing, just offering. My fingers hovered a few inches from hers, close enough for her to choose. After a long pause, she placed her hand in mine. Not with certainty, but with quiet courage. Her skin was warm. Her pulse steady. But after a few seconds, she slowly pulled away. Not out of rejection, but because trust takes time. The silence that followed wasn't sharp. It was fragile. Like something real had finally been placed on the table, and neither of us wanted to break it. When I left her place that night, the cool air hit me differently. There was weight on my chest, not heavy in a bad way, but real. Some loves don't sprint. They hesitate. They question. They ache a little. But beneath all that, they keep reaching forward. Some moments don't arrive with a warning. They build quietly, like a soft wave rising slowly beneath your feet, and before you realize it, you're standing in something that isn't casual anymore. It was a cool evening, just after sunset. The city lights had begun to bloom across the skyline, warm and golden against the deep blue of the night. She and I found ourselves on a park bench overlooking the water, not planned, just drifted there after walking for what felt like hours. She had her hands wrapped loosely around a paper cup of tea, hair falling naturally around her face. The breeze kept brushing a few strands across her cheek, and she made no effort to fix them. There was something disarmingly human about the way she existed when she wasn't guarding herself. For a long while, we didn't speak. The night was doing all the talking, the wind, the distant hum of the city, the rustling of leaves. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. Then she broke the quiet. "I can feel it," she said softly, still looking at the water. "This pull." Her voice wasn't shaky, it was calm. Too calm. Like someone standing at the edge of something they've promised themselves not to fall into again. She turned toward me then. Not dramatically, not slowly, just enough for our eyes to meet under the orange halo of the streetlight above us. "I need to be honest with you," she continued. "I'm too old to play games. I don't flirt just to pass the time. I don't want to build something on half-promises." Every word was measured, not because she doubted what she felt, but because she was protecting it. I didn't look away. Not for a second. I could feel my pulse quicken, but not in the restless way it does with something fleeting. This felt steady. Like something I could lean into. I let out a quiet breath, leaning slightly closer, not enough to touch, but enough for her to feel my presence. "Then let's skip to the good part," I said. Her eyes flickered, surprise, soft amusement, something unspoken. "And what's the good part?" "This," I murmured. "Sitting here. Being honest. No pretending. No running." For a long heartbeat, she didn't move. Then her fingers, still wrapped around her cup, loosened. Her other hand slid from her lap, resting on the bench between us, close, just close. I turned my hand palm up, wordless. She looked at it for a second. Then she placed her hand in mine. No hesitation this time. Her skin was warm against the cool air. My thumb brushed lightly against the back of her hand, and she exhaled, a soft, unguarded breath. It felt like a door opening, not wide, but enough to step through. Her gaze softened, the usual guard in her eyes quietly fading. "This part," she whispered, almost to herself. "I could get used to this." The world didn't need to shift around us. No music swelled, no stars aligned. It was just two people on a park bench, and a feeling that no longer tried to hide. Some connections don't need fireworks. They bloom in quiet corners, like light slipping under a door, soft but unstoppable. After that night on the bench, something shifted between us. Not suddenly. Not in a way the world would notice. But we noticed. We started seeing each other more often, without labeling it, without rushing it. Small, unplanned meetings that felt like they were happening because they were meant to. A walk after work. A late coffee. A quiet evening spent talking about everything and nothing. This night was one of those evenings. She'd invited me to her home again, this time not with the careful distance of before, but with a gentle ease, like the door had already been opened. The lights were low. A soft instrumental record played in the background, almost like a heartbeat. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and something warm from the kitchen. She was wearing a loose, deep blue sweater that fell off one shoulder slightly, and she laughed when I teased her about it being the most disarming armor I'd ever seen. The sound of her laughter filled the room, unguarded, unhidden. We sat on the couch, a blanket draped across both of us, a shared cup of hot chocolate between us. It wasn't a scene that screamed romance to anyone else, but to me, it felt like the world had gone quiet around us. At one point, she set her mug down and leaned back, tucking one leg beneath her. Her body turned slightly toward me, and I could feel the warmth radiating off her in slow waves. I mirrored the movement, not calculated, just natural. Our hands brushed against each other beneath the blanket. Just a touch. A feather-light moment that sent a soft ripple through the air. Her eyes lifted to mine. No walls. No forced distance. I don't remember the last time I let someone get this close, she admitted quietly. Her voice didn't shake, but I could feel the weight behind it, the kind of truth that doesn't get said unless it matters. I didn't try to give her promises I couldn't keep. I just reached out, gently, letting my fingers find hers. She didn't flinch. This time, she met me halfway. Her fingers slid into mine, warm and steady. She leaned closer until her head rested lightly against my shoulder. The weight of it wasn't heavy, it was grounding. I could feel the soft rhythm of her breathing against my chest, each exhale settling deeper into the quiet between us. I turned my head slightly, and my cheek brushed against her hair. It smelled like vanilla and rain, soft, familiar, like something I didn't know I'd missed. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence was no longer a barrier, it was a place we met in. For the first time, I felt her relax, not just in the way her body leaned into mine, but in the way her guard melted around the edges. It wasn't a grand surrender. It was softer than that. Quieter. And maybe that's why it meant more. In the dim light, with her head against me and my hand wrapped around hers, I realized something simple: we weren't two people trying to prove anything. We were just here, and that was enough. The thing about love is, it rarely starts with a grand declaration. More often, it begins in silence. In the spaces where two people stop pretending, stop performing, and simply exist together. The night was calm. A soft rain tapped against the window, the kind of rhythm that makes the world feel slower, safer. She and I were still on that couch, the same couch where trust had quietly started to grow between us. A single lamp painted the room in gold. She hadn't moved away since leaning into me earlier. If anything, she'd drawn closer over time, the kind of closeness that doesn't scream for attention, it just feels right. For a long time, we didn't speak. And that silence wasn't awkward anymore. It had transformed. It was no longer the space between strangers or the pause between uncertain steps. It was something shared. Something steady. Finally, she shifted slightly, tilting her head up to look at me. There was a softness in her eyes, the kind that comes when someone finally lets their guard fall and doesn't feel the urge to pick it back up. "I didn't think I'd let anyone in again," she whispered. I could have answered with something clever. Something poetic. But that wasn't what the moment needed. Instead, I lifted my hand and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My thumb brushed her jawline, not possessive, not demanding, just there, real and steady. "You didn't let anyone in," I said softly. "You let me in." Her breath caught slightly, like she wasn't used to being seen that clearly. Her fingers tightened around mine, not out of fear, but in quiet confirmation. Then came the smallest smile. Not a practiced smile. Not the one she used when she wanted to look strong or unbothered. This one was real. Fragile. Warm. She leaned forward just a little, and this time, there was no hesitation. The distance between us wasn't a wall anymore, it was just air. Our lips met, slow and soft, like two people arriving at the same place without rushing. It wasn't about passion exploding or fireworks lighting the night. It was about peace. About the kind of kiss that whispers, "I trust you." When we finally pulled back, the rain was still falling, the room still glowing gold. But everything inside me felt different, steadier. She rested her forehead against mine, our breaths mingling in the small space between us. "No more games," she murmured. I nodded, my hand still cradling hers. No more walls. And that was it. No grand speeches. No dramatic music. Just a quiet understanding between two people who had spent so long circling around what they wanted, and had finally chosen to stop running. She laid her head against my chest again, and I wrapped my arms around her. The rain became a lullaby. Her breathing slowed. My heart matched its rhythm. In that quiet room, with nothing but the soft sound of rain and the warmth of her in my arms, I realized, this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Not of a perfect story, but of something real. If this moment made your heart pause for just a second, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet, honest love. Because sometimes, the best stories don't shout, they whisper.